Joining us today for Bonus Conversations on the Coast is Patrick Smith, and he has written a book called Ask the Pilot, Everything You Need to Know About Air Travel, published by Riverhead Books. And thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
You know, today we have you on, and you are an airline pilot and a writer. And I just want to share with our listeners what the Boston Globe columnist Alex Beam said about you as a writer. Patrick Smith, he says, is the rare writer, dare I say the unique writer, able to translate the ways of flight to man. Smith is extraordinarily knowledgeable about modern aviation and communicates beautifully in English, not in pilotese. Smith is the ideal seatmate, a companion, writer, an explainer who will set your mind at ease. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this book. Now, I wanted to get that on the air because it implies to me that your reasons for writing the book is not just to answer a lot of questions, but to get something else across. What is that?
Well, that's absolutely true. I wrote the book as a way both to inform and to evangelize a little bit. Mm-hmm. It's more than a book about flying or airplanes per se. All the buzzword topics are in there, from turbulence to wind shear to discussions about aerodynamics. But the scope of the book is the greater realm of air travel in whole.
Okay.
If you can understand that. I'm kind of a throwback maybe in that I still see planes as a way of bridging people, cultures, and continents. And ideally, when a reader puts Ask the Pilot down, he or she should feel not only informed and more secure, but rejuvenated and even enthusiastic about the idea of flying, crazy as that sounds in 2004.
Well, I think that's because you still find in flying, you know, a thrill, a kind of romance, if you will.
I do. We have to admit that the glamour days of flying are gone, and in a way good riddance, because we don't want to return to the sort of caste system that we had where only the wealthiest people could fly.
Sure.
And the subsequent indignities of flying are well known to everybody and have been hashed to death. I'm just asking that people not take it completely for granted.
Okay.
The basic underpinning of the book and of what I'm trying to say is a hope that readers will come to see the airplane as more than just an inconvenient means to an end.
Well, one of the ways that you do that, I mean, beyond answering such questions as how does a plane take off and can it glide, you know, safely home without any engines working, one of the things you get into is airline liveries. Is that the word? And
Right. Airline liveries or paint schemes, logos, whatever you want to call it, the kind of the aesthetic designs of the airlines. That's actually one of my favorite parts of the book. I do a critique of kind of the best and worst airline designs out there.
Yeah, I think we'll just stay with what you call the best, U.S. Airways. And you go on to say, with its smoky, post-apocalyptic gray and unadorned outline of the American flag, a U.S. Airways jet is, at quick glance, drably reminiscent of a military transport. But look again. The slight red accenting is remarkably effective, the typeface refined and elegant. This one's a winner, and you give it an overall grade of A, and it's the only one that you do.
I think it's the only American carrier that deserves an A. Let's hope U.S. Airways sticks around for more people to appreciate their colors. But my favorite airline scheme overall is probably that of Air India. One of the things I like to point out about an Air India jet, if you look very closely at it, there's a detailing, a drawing of a little mogul arch around every single window side of the cabin.
Uh-huh.
It almost looks as if it's been drawn by hand. It's very meticulously done and elegant.
That's really going to some length to get into the livery and make it important.
Well, that's part of what I do, I guess. The book touches on everything from aerodynamics to airport architecture to critiquing the service of the airlines. And I guess I'm more of an airline buff. It's the industry in whole that gets me going more so than the visceral kind of left brain act of flying itself.
Well, one of the things that gets you going, I think, is JetBlue, which you call an interloper. Why is it so successful? Is that because it bridges the gap between yesterday and today?
In a way it does, though that's not necessarily what makes them successful. What makes them successful, for the time being, is they're able to operate so cheaply, and they're not the only ones. We're seeing a complete overhaul of the business models of the airlines right now, and it's carriers like JetBlue, Southwest, et cetera, that are driving that. These airlines, because they're young and fresh and have streamlined, efficient fleets, are able to keep incredibly low overhead costs that are killing the large carriers who have no choice but to match these interlopers' low fares and take a loss. And
well, we have
jury's still out on what's going to happen. But
we have much more to get into, and on next week's bonus Conversations on the Coast, we're going to find out what Scrod, Bosox, and WAPO mean. Don't miss it.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at JimFosterCoc and email jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
Joining us again for bonus Conversations on the Coast this week is Patrick Smith, author of Ask the Pilot, Everything You Need to Know About Air Travel. The exigencies of time make me stomp on something you were saying last week, Mr. Smith, something to do with what an airline like JetBlue can teach, if you will, the so-called major airlines.
Well, what JetBlue is good at doing, and other carriers now too, for example, Song, the funky spinoff from Delta Airlines, they're able to inject a little bit of flair back into the flying experience, and on some level, airlines are starting to get the message that a dignified in-flight experience and making a profit are not necessarily mutually exclusive. And this segues into a discussion about air service in general, whether people are aware of it or not. Domestic U.S. in-flight service is arguably the worst in the world. And when you look at the travel magazine surveys every year, it's always the Asian and European airlines that are lauded for best service. Heck, even Ethiopian Airlines is known around the world for its pampering.
Oh, good Lord.
And we have a lot of catching up to do, and it's a good sign. It's a small sign, but a good sign that these airlines are making it at least a little bit more fun.
Yeah. One of the things in the news lately has been the possibility of changing the rule on using cell phones while an airplane is in flight, from totally forbidding them to saying it's okay. What's that all about?
I'm sorry. We are definitely going to see a change in the rules. How long it takes remains to be seen. And I think the social issues of this, more so than the technical issues, are what's going to prove a sticking point. Do we really want to be sitting in a plane with 200 people talking on their cell phones at the same time? Meanwhile, while the airlines are erring on the safe side, there have been documented cases of cell phones interfering with equipment. And, in fact, a cell phone is suspected in the crash of a Swiss commuter plane back in 2000.
Oh, wow.
Under testing now, though, is a system that will link low-power cell signals and collect them and then transmit them through an onboard unit called a picocell. This gets kind of technical.
Okay.
Basically, it'll collect your cell signal and beam it more safely, either via satellite or directly to the ground.
Wow. Now, speaking of getting technical, you throw around a lot of acronyms in this book, and there are three of them that come up, I think, almost on the same page at least. They are SCROD, BOSOX, and WAPO. What are they all about? One of them, you say, I think you created yourself?
No. The way it works is overlaying the world are thousands of waypoints, intersections of longitude and latitude that are used for en route navigation.
Gotcha.
And they're always assigned a 5-letter name. And what's curious about them and kind of interesting is they often are assigned names based on geographic characteristics of what's underneath.
Oh, okay.
And, for example, flying out across the Atlantic, when you're leaving the gateway areas along the east coast of the United States, you'll look on the map and you'll notice they're named after fish. You'll see scrod and whale, and heading out on a transatlantic flight, it makes you very hungry.
Bo Sox, I guess, is self-explanatory.
If you're a baseball fan, you'll understand Bo Sox, which is an intersection up over west central Massachusetts, I think.
Now, there's another one that you mentioned in the book, which I think is terribly important because a lot of people are said to have experienced this, and it's not pleasant. The acronym is DVT, an affliction known as deep vein thrombosis.
Deep vein thrombosis is essentially a blood clot, and it's gotten a lot of press, but it's usually a problem only on the absolute longest flights. We have flights now exceeding 16, 17, 18 hours, and if you're cramped in an economy seat for that length of time, this can be a problem. The easiest way to avoid it is simply to get up and stretch every so often. Do some of those in-seat exercises that they talk about in the in-flight magazine. One thing that the Singapore Airlines has done is they've actually set up an onboard socializing area for coach class on their mega long hauls, those 18-hour flights, so that people are encouraged to get up and walk around. It's not just to give a feel of better service, but it's also to encourage people to move around to avoid any DVT symptoms.
We have about 1 minute left, and one of the subjects I'd like you to touch on, I know that's not enough time for it, is the business of flying and acts of terrorism. How do you think we should be feeling about that as we sit here today?
We could go on all day about this, Jim, but I'm asked all the time, are we safer since September 11th? And the answer is yes, but whether that's because of or in spite of our post-September 11th mindset is something we can argue about. We're safer, but you know what? Even at its worst, flying has never been particularly dangerous, not even on September 10th, 2001. Flying has always been a target for sabotage, and it's going to remain that way. And that's not to say it's ever going to be dangerous, but remember, in this country alone, close to 30,000 commercial flights take off and land safely every day.
Wow. Well, on that optimistic note, we have to say goodbye and thank Patrick Smith, the author of Ask the Pilot, everything you need to know about air travel, for spending 2 weeks doing bonus conversations on the coast. Thanks very much.
Thanks for having me.
Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at Jim Foster COC and email jimfostercoc@gmail.com.